All right. Welcome. And we're back at another Monday here on the CyberCall. And I think we have a really important CyberCall today in that, for a long time, Brian Blakely has been on and Gary Pica talking about, the language of the business. And so, I want to start to dedicate some of the cyber calls to bringing people on that are actually in the buyer seat, have had that role, and so that you can hear it directly from them and what they hear, what resonates to them as business executives, and what doesn't, because we can't help a customer, we can't help a prospect if we can't sell them. That's the reality. So that's one of the most important things. Sorry for the dings. Let me just turn off forgot to silence my Apple stuff. All right, so there we go. That's all set there. As always, this is now in podcasts. We'll do some intros shortly. One of the really cool things about it is, like last week, Brian, the one with Kelvin, that you were on, that between the video CyberCall and the podcast, we were right around 1,000 or so views. And so, yeah, Phil, it's really starting to, get a lot of momentum back again. And it's really cool to see. We've always had this, big group that was in Crowdcast, but then we've had to switch multiple platforms, and so we're retaking taking that momentum. So it's exciting. All right, just a quick banter I like to start off with this week. Eric, you and I have been talking. I've talked to some breach attorneys, some companies in the MDR space, about what's going on with SonicWall. And so what kind of this was an article came out about a week ago. Someone's got back. I'm getting a little feedback. Is anybody hearing that, or is it me? But yeah, maybe just if you can mute whoever, try that out. But anyway, an article came out about a week ago from, I think it was Bleeping or one of those types of organizations, media, and said that between Arctic Wolf, Huntress, etc., that there was this proliferation. They mentioned Acura and maybe another ransomware group, but there was this proliferation, Brian, of new, attacks, and that potentially there was a 0 day that was out there again around the SonicWall SSL VPN. SonicWall has come out and said absolutely not. There is no additional 0 day. And yet, Eric, in talking to you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you've been pretty busy with this. Can you, just from your standpoint, and you're on the business side of attorney, so maybe kind of set the stage there. You're not a breach attorney, but I did have some conversations, and we're going to have a special talk on next week who's dealing with, I think, north of 20 of these personally right now. But, talk to us about why are you dealing with this and what are you seeing?
Yeah, and I can't speak to whether it's a 0 day or not, but I can tell you that I have more of my clients dealing with this issue than any other issue post Kaseya. And, not that I represent a tremendous number of MSPs, but I represent a lot of MSPs, and to have multiple of my clients dealing with the same issue, including some that tell me it's post patch, I think is definitely peculiar, and would lead one to believe that maybe the scales are tipping toward a 0 day instead of something else.
Yeah. Brian, from a CISO perspective or vCISO perspective, how do you, any advice on, we've been talking about, and you've talked about, this is more of a technology that needs to be deprecated. Corey Clark came out with a great article. His company was bought by SonicWall, but he came out, Solutions Granted, he came out a great article saying, hey, look, for years I've been talking about deprecating and making sure you have all the necessary patching, MFAs and all the necessary defense and depth around SSL VPN. So on one hand, we have this is a technology that should be deprecated, in my opinion. On another hand, what would your thoughts be when, as Eric says, it would seem that between the different attorneys I'm talking to, the different MDR companies I'm talking to, it would appear that this is more than just nothing to see here. Is it, shut down SSL VPN if you're using this? What are your thoughts?
The nothing to see here, and we talked about Ingram a few weeks ago too, is that we're not getting the transparency we need to be able to react and do what we need to do. And the nothing to see here always reminds me of the original Naked Gun with Leslie Nielsen when he's standing in front of a fireworks factory and it's going off and blowing up and there's all kinds of stuff and he's like, nothing to see here, folks, move away, and that kind of thing. There's a lot to see. I just don't think we're getting the whole message. But to your point, the bigger problem here is deprecating some of these older technologies and SSL VPN and some of these others. I really think if you're not looking at zero trust beyond the buzzword of zero trust, actually putting in the defense in depth and zero trust principles, SASE types of solution, right? That the perimeter is end users' fingertips now, and we need to have better things in place. Fortinet's deprecated SSL VPN on a lot of their appliances, enforcing zero trust or IPsec type of tunnels for whatever reason. But the bottom line is I'm not sure how much we can rely on a lot of these vendors, and it erodes trust when these vendors can't produce, even if it's forthright and transparent. And Eric, I know you on the attorney, there's this balance you have to strike between transparency and at the same time, not giving away too much and protecting yourself. But at the same time, MSPs rely on our vendors to produce transparent information so we know what's going on, what the root cause, how it's being addressed, what to do. And it just feels like some high level, maybe overlaw your lip service sometimes that we get instead of something that we can actually react to and protect our clients and ourselves.
Yeah. Well said, Brian. So next week, we will have Spencer Pollock on. We will have who's a breach attorney for McDonald Hopkins. We will have on Chris Lair, who we've had on multiple times to kind of walk through, again, not, hey, let's beat up on a vendor. This is more so comms strategies as a breach attorney. What should you be doing? How should you be working with your clients? Because when, whether we'll find out eventually whether this is another 0 day or not. But in the meantime, if you're an MSP dealing with multiple customers that has, this issue, we'll get strategies for you. And again, I'm not sure who on our panel has got the feedback, but if you could check what's going on there, I'd appreciate it.
I'm not hearing feedback. Is anyone else hearing feedback?
I was. Anyway, maybe it's just me, Eric. Maybe it's my head and my marbles. All right, let's get on. Let's get on into it. All right. So this week we are talking about how to sell or get into the mind of the CFO, right? And one of the ones that I think is, so probably underserved, right? As far as thinking about this from an MSP's perspective. Jason, who I'm going to introduce momentarily, spent, better part of 2 decades, not in our space, but as a corporate controller, as a CFO, and, working with governance, IT, security, and you as the MSP selling or to sell him. So getting into his mind and understanding how he thinks, what matters, what doesn't matter, I think is really important. So here, when setting the stage, I'm going to just talk about the real decision often comes from the person that you may not be thinking about, the person that you might think is, just the guy or gal that, although they have the checkbook, we don't really need to involve that person. And I think this call is going to make you think a lot differently about how to involve this person, when to do it. And so let's get on into it. As far as intros go, let me start off with our guest, and then we'll go around the horn, and I'll hand it right over to Eric to kick the questions off. So, Jason, welcome. It's great to have you with us for a first time. If you could tell us a little about yourself, what you do there at InfoSystems, and I'll go over to Brian and on.
Yeah, thank you. And Andrew, thank you so much for the invite. You and I met, I guess it's early this year at Ride Boom 2025, and had some great discussions, which I think kicked off a lot of this. And that event opened my mind to a lot of things as well. But of course, I'm the CFO for InfoSystems, and we are a growing MSP. This company started in the 90s as a VAR. So we do two sides. We do value-added reselling, and we also do, obviously, MSP. So, the key thing that you just remember with the CFO is they do hold the purse strings, right? And I've built my career through different organizations where you can think of finance and operations. Like in the restaurant space I was in, they were, oh, you're just the guy that doesn't give me the money I need to operate my business. And, you just withhold money and you give me a budget I can't attain, et cetera. Well, think about that as your clients you're going to. There's that friction between maybe a CFO and a technical person. They're trying to get money for the stuff that you're telling them you need, and they're trying to get that approved. But the finance guy is saying, no, I don't see the value in it. They're speaking in different languages, I think Russian and English, right? It's like you're speaking around the same topics, and it's important to CFO, but they don't see the value, so they may not approve what you're bringing to them. So how do you educate the technical people if you don't have a seat at the table to the CFO to go upstream and show the value you're bringing? I think that's where you're getting to, Andrew. And so that brings down that friction, and that person becomes a hero with them, and they can get what they need. It helps protect the company. We all win. The MSP gets a sale. So I think that's the big thing, the big picture I want to take away with this. Like, hey, we're all talking around the same thing, but how do we bridge that gap in communication? But I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm excited about it. I hope it do you justice. You guys speaking about the Sonic Wall stuff, I hear stuff, I hear things, and man, you guys are speaking Greek to me with the jargon and all that kind of stuff. I know it's important, but man, getting it upstream to me is just a little bit different level. But I appreciate it because I know it's needed.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that last part, because that's one of the things that I think is really important that everybody takes away from this call, that, we're all sitting there saying this is wildly important. And you're sitting there going, yeah, but I don't get it. So let's keep that out there. Brian, real quick intro from you. Thanks again for being a co-host.
Yeah, excited to be here and welcome, Jason. Yeah, Brian Blakely, Chief Risk Officer, and I lead the Professional Services Division at Compliance Scorecard and help MSPs and their clients down compliance journeys, ISO, SOC 2, CMMC, that kind of thing. Excited to be here. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, well, Phil, it's good to have you back. Thanks as always, Miss.
Always good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Eric, intro, and I'll let you kick off the questions to Jason.
Yeah, thank you. So just quick intro, Eric Tildes. I am a former MSP owner and current MSP attorney, helping MSPs with their commercial contracting and legal needs. So Jason, thank you for being here, and Andrew, thanks for having all of us here. And I think in your intro, Jason, you mentioned English, Russian, and Greek. That kind of sets the stage.
And I'm not C3PO. I don't understand. I don't speak all those languages.
So that sets the stage for, MSPs and frankly lawyers too are notorious for speaking in languages that our prospects can't quite relate to. And even though you have threats and breaches and things like that in the news every day, can you tell us what really resonates with business executives, particularly business finance executives, and what is it that misses the mark?
Sure. Yeah, I think most executives connect with discussions that tie the technology and security to measurable business outcomes, such as, revenue growth, cost efficiency, regulatory compliance, brand reputation. All that is kind of tied to that. and how you kind of get their attention is you talk to, I'll group it in kind of a few categories here. You want to lead with business outcomes, not technical features, right? I don't need the technical features. I don't need what's going on. How are you affecting each one of those things I just mentioned, translated to risk, like downtime or compliance gaps measured in financial terms. That's kind of what I'm concerned to. What's the big picture with it? Quantifying the impact in dollars, if you can do that. If you can quantify what it means, if it be measured, because then if it's measured and it's dollars, I can rank it and prioritize it, and then make it something that is a need, maybe potential in the business. Align it to our strategy, right? Show how your solutions support the company's specific growth or market and penetration strategies that they have. Customer goals, risk mitigation strategy. It can be a strategy as well. It doesn't always have to be about growth. It can be mitigating some risk that's out there that we're trying to protect. So that's part of it. So aligned to the strategy of the company. And then the last thing I think is important too is build trust through evidence, right? I'm going to be cautious. Most CFOs will be like, yeah, just because you tell me doesn't mean that you can do it, right? So kind of show me, the Jerry Maguire, help me help you, type of thing. Show them with this evidence, that could be independent audits, proven processes, real world success stories. If you have people that can vouch for you, that'll help. When you talk about missing the mark, I go back to it's just like, don't share the how. I don't care how. I don't care how about vulnerabilities and threats and things. I do what I don't. Focus on the what. What can happen if I do this or don't do this, and the why. That really gets it to that next level to really help, really get it to how it impacts the business.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And as a CFO, and particularly think back to your pre-MSP CFO days, you mentioned seeing things as something other than just a cost. So what is it that makes you see an investment in security or an investment in IT in general as an enabler of growth instead of just a cost? There's a cost to it, right? But how do you look at that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's the thing that, I was reading the other day about a Gartner study. Forget what CFOs think necessarily. So this is a Gartner study. So this is going to be more higher level companies that have CFOs and big boards and all that kind of stuff. But they said a stat that 85% of CEOs now view cybersecurity as critical to business growth. So whether the CFO that you're talking to sees it as a growth enabler or not, it really is. And that's what you have to educate them on. And I'll spend a little time here, I think, to kind of paint the picture of where I came and where I am now. A CFO is basically a steward for the company resources, right? I'll mitigate risk and as much as possible. That's the financial and fraud. I spend a lot of time there, internal processes and controls that I do for fraud and stuff like that. For things, I look at brand reputation. I look at enterprise risk, operational risk. I am kind of more of an operational role here at this company as well, because I have operational experience in my background. Not technical operation, more the business operation. So that's something that CFOs can pull in as well. So just remember that. And when cybersecurity is now directly tied to the enterprise value of the company, the brand reputation, and operational continuity, so it's becoming very important. But I realize that now. Let's talk about where I was, right? I kind of looked at it as a sunk cost. There's kind of a need to have. And I'll kind of tell an example. I was with the company, and I think I was sharing this story with Andrew. If you guys ever heard of something called arc flash, basically it's where if you stick a screwdriver near an outlet, it can arc to it and electrocute you. And that was an engineering company, and we were trying to sell. We had this guy that could re-engineer the networking and the layout of your electrical grid and layout in the industrial space, to where it could help reduce the risk of somebody being around breakers and arc happen to them and just basically kill them or hurt them severely. And man, we had trouble selling it. It was just like, until somebody got hurt or they see the value that way, or OSHA made them do it, they didn't see the value of it. And that's kind of how I viewed cybersecurity. Yeah, people are talking about it. Hey, my head's in the sand. It ain't going to happen to me, right? It's happened to everybody else. It's not going to happen to me. And so, I looked at it as a need to have, not a growth enabler. So, and then about 3 to 5 years ago, I started hearing more. That's when things started coming up in the market where I'd hear, forums I'm in or literature I'm reading in the CFO space talking about, ransomware and things that are happening. I didn't understand it and what it meant and how it could impact me, but I'm like, okay, there's something here. And, doing insurance renewals, they're asking you about certain things that, that I didn't know about with cybersecurity. Do you need cybersecurity insurance? Well, I don't know. Do I? They couldn't answer it. So an MSP could definitely come in and help, with that review of answering insurance questionnaires, right? So I think that you have to, some middle tier CFOs and lower companies, they may not know yet. So that's where you got to educate them. If you're going into a higher level company, a large company, or more of an enterprise, they're probably going to see the value a lot more because their board's talking about it, their CEO is talking about it. They may have a CISO or other people that are helping them with the risk mitigation. So it's bubbling up to them a lot more. But I think what hit the point home for me, and this is when a light bulb was at Pride Boom this year, when, what was his name? I think it was Brent Adamson. Is that the keynote speaker that spoke? And he was talking about the larger the deal, the larger the company, the more stakeholders you have in it. And I'm like, man, that's so true. And I think, and I started thinking to myself, that's me. I mean, I believe as a CFO in most of the decisions, they're probably a key stakeholder. I asked Mr. Adamson, I think offline, if he could help me understand where that was in the key stakeholders, what the CFO would be like in the top 5 or whatever. And he didn't want to say it, rightfully so, I get it. But I think from my opinion, because of the purse string, I think it's very important. And Andrew, you talked about that purse string to where you can control if it's going to be spent this year, spent next year, spent it all. So the education is properly. And I know I'm speaking a lot. I'll get to your question, Eric, but I want to speak to it. This is, I think, is very important for MSPs because I'm speaking from an CFO at an MSP and also a CFO on the other side. An equation that came to me a while back, it was called value equals experience over price. And I heard this in the restaurant space, and you'll kind of get this when you look at 2 different restaurant chains. You got Waffle House and Ruth Chris Steakhouse. Value is the experience over price. Well, at both of those brands, people are going, so they're seeing value, but the experience you're getting at Ruth Chris is totally different than you're going to get at Waffle House. Well, that's what you've got to start speaking as an MSP to the business leaders, is like, what value do you bring? If you're speaking only on technical stuff and you're not showing them how you're going to impact their business, you're going to stay at the more lower price level. You're not going to level up to what the business needs are. If you can level up to what those business needs are, then you're going to really help them make a decision. And we fight this at our current company, guys. When you're trying to get a deal and you're trying to get a sale, you just want somebody to pay for what you have, and you start getting and negotiating down on price. Really understand the value and spend the time educating yourself from your partners or your third-party vendors that can help you to what the true business value is that you can bring to your clients, and educate them through that. So I think that's a big key that you need to think about as you're leveling up with the C-suite CFO. You got to show the value outside of the technical stuff that the IT people value. Get it to the business outcome level. And so now I see it as a growth and competitive advantage. So let's talk about that. Clearly, cybersecurity supports revenue continuity. It enables us to win and retain clients. It helps us meet requirements to enter a new market. If I want to go to a new market and it's heavily regulated, I'm going to need to know if our current, things, our tool stack that we have, our current system processes can go into that market and we can penetrate it well and have a competitive advantage. That's the last piece. Are you a competitive advantage example? That helps open doors for new contracts or numbers of clients and customers demand. And if you're a private equity play, so if you're looking at a company and a company's getting ready to sell and there's a private equity play, cybersecurity is a top 5 area in PE firms right behind financial and operation metrics. So it is very important, people. So it's just, you got to show it as a growth enabler. You need to show that it's not only reduces risk, but it also creates upside opportunity. And that's a long-winded answer. And I'm sorry I camped out of there, but I thought it was kind of important.
Yeah, no, it's really important. So as a CFO and you get a proposal that comes across your desk for an IT project, a security project, et cetera, what's the process that you go through to make sure that proposed product or services aligns with the company's strategic goals and revenue goals?
Not against the revenue goals or both? Are they like some?
Both, yeah.
Let me say, because for me, the biggest thing for me is like, does this project protect or enable or grow is what I'll say, one of our revenue streams? If this is yes, then the next question becomes, does it support a long-term strategy? And what I mean by that is it could support a current revenue stream, but what if I'm looking to shut that down or change it because there's something in the market downstream that I'm seeing that we don't want to go there anymore? So it may support an existing revenue stream, but it may be not been a long-term strategy. But if it supports a current revenue stream and it's in a long-term strategy, then that becomes very important, right? So that's what I need to figure out, is how you're going to help, enable or grow that long-term strategy.
Yeah, Andrew, can I ask a follow-up question? Yeah,
What's that?
Jason. So I think that's key and important, and that gets to that point where the MSP knowing you in your business. One of the things you started off with is you said VAR transitioning to services. So in that example, I think, boy, Jason, I might ask you something about what's that mix? That's that revenue mix right now, because you might be 90% VAR and 10% services, but you really want to grow the services area of the business. You may
Hey, are you in
evaluate.
my head right now? The percentages aren't there, but that's really what we're trying to do. Good job, Brian.
Everybody has that switches from VAR to services, right? And so, but I mean, you're looking at that revenue mix. So then translating some of the risks and opportunities might be something might be more valuable if you're trying to grow your services, which are more enterprise value. If you have a risk in those areas, you'd probably be willing to invest more than you would in something to fix, a risk or even enable the VAR side of the business, as an
That's right.
example.
Absolutely. You're spot on. And coming out of the example for the lines of strategy, then, the next thing I want to ask is for a business case. And all that means, guys, is a justification of why I should go with you. And it's more than just the vulnerabilities and threats. It's the risk mitigation, growing a business, what it means. So, in the business case, to quantify the avoidance of loss, like risk reduction, and or the potential gains, right? Is it going to enable sales? Is it going to increase productivity? Is it going to, help confirm customer trust? All these things go into the business case. There's different things. Or is this, it's a sunk cost for now, but it's going to position us for a year from now to be where we want to go, right? That's value to me, right? Because it's helping me get to where I want to go. There may not be an immediate return, is what I'm saying.
Brian, Eric, do you mind if I go behind
Yeah,
it?
go ahead.
So Jason, a lot of times you'll hear MSPs talk about, all our great customers and all our great processes, and this is how we do it. Do you really care? Do you care? Like, and if not, or if so, what are you looking for in that sales process as evidence? Is it they understand, literally how I'm generating revenue, understanding how I'm need to mitigate risk? Can you talk to us about, again, don't be an MSP CFO, be the previous CFO that again, MSPs are notorious for all our great accolades and resources and differentiation. But I'd really love to hear from what's going through your right? You're computing all this stuff, right? As a CFO, what matters?
Yeah, it's a great question. And where I kind of view it is, in my side, is it an operational or technical process you're trying to validate, and or financial? I can get really deep into financial controls and all that kind of stuff. But if it's operational or technical, I'm going to lean on my technical team to validate that out, because I may not understand it totally. And then obviously come to them to see, okay, how does this impact the overall business? Is this something that's only going to impact your area and only affect you, which may be important, maybe what you need to do your area well, but then does it translate into more of a growth opportunity for the company, or does it impact the company? If it can impact the total company or strategy, that seems to be a lot more important to me, obviously, than just affecting some particular business unit, right? Now, not to say that that's not important to correct, but it may not be a priority for right now if we can deal without it, if that makes any sense. Because there's only limited resources, right? You only have limited funds and capital. So I'm constantly prioritizing that to what is the biggest bang for the buck, basically.
Let's dumb it down as something as simple as MFA for a second, Jason. Pretend again you didn't understand what multi-factor was, but it is something that has to be systemic across, and not only again should it be on your M365, but it should be on your mission critical systems, and it should be on your administrative accounts and your service accounts and all this stuff. And you're sitting there as a CFO going, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. But so how, this is something Brian is excellent about translating this into business terms.
That's right.
But maybe you and Brian can banter on this a little bit, because I think this is the part where, MSP sitting there going, oh my gosh, why aren't they doing this? This is like table stakes and so mission critical, yet you're sitting there going, I don't know, why is it important? And why do we need this?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I call those greens fees. This is the price of admission to get in the game. You have to do that. I see that now, but I understand sitting on the other side. I may not see it. But, I think that's where you easily go to, if it takes okay, CFO, how many people do you have in your company? Okay, I have 200. Okay. If you have one person that goes in there and clicks this and they have an MFA issue, and what does it mean? You could be transferring money out because that's an AP person that is now listening to somebody that's hacked something in your Office 365, gets in there and takes your email, and now they're looking like a client. They're wanting to transfer their bank account from their current bank account to another one when it's not. And they just going to, so it's really getting them to understand that this simple thing that, the value, it's not a very expensive thing to do. Yes, it is a pain for people to have to pull out their phone and or authenticate or other ways that they want to do it, but just help them understand that the risk that this is going to stop potentially and how it's going to reduce the percentage of it, the probability of it happening.
So
I know, Brian,
okay.
I love your thought too about that.
Yeah, Brian, as we go to you, Jason, you're okay with an example. You don't see that as FUD. Just to clarify, if I said, hey, so your AP person did this, you would be okay with that. It's not, oh, here comes the FUD.
Yeah. And I think it's mature to the CFO if you can understand who you're talking to. If it's somebody that definitely gets MFA and whatever, and they don't, I mean, it's really, that's a level of talking to somebody that really doesn't understand the value of MFA at all. That really seems to have a lot of pushback, doesn't see that it's just a nuisance. Why do I have to do that? They don't know my password. I mean, it's really getting them to understand it. But I do think it's good to bring out because that's a very key, important thing that the CFO should be thinking about is fraud control on their side. So CFO, like I'm responsible for enterprise risk and operational risk, et cetera, but a CFO or a certain business maybe only control about financial. So if you're talking to the purse string holder, how does it impact them? Well, go to how it can affect an AP clerk or an AR clerk, or how it could affect somebody on their team, and they could really mess up their side of the business.
Brian, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and Jason made some key points there. I think in the MFA example, and getting to know Jason and his business, and this is where you take it a step further and get out of nerdy acronyms like MFA, and you kind of change the discussion and saying, hey, Jason, we looked at some of your contracts, and it looks like you've got some requirements around data security and compliance and that kind of stuff in some of your largest client contracts. And let's say, Jason, you have $30,000 you can spend either on your VAR side of the business or for your MSP services, right? And you're saying, oh, well, I've got $30,000 I can spend in one area and in the other. I think a good MSP that knows you and knows your business, they come and say, hey, you've got to prove that you have MFA. The best way to do that is an attestation that you're going to build trust with your clients. We think that $30,000 that you got for next year, you should spend that on some sort of compliance to prove your trust, and this will grow your services side of the business, right? MFA is a part of that, but to think more strategic and bigger, because MFA is just one thing, it's a whack-a-mole, and I don't want to come to you with the issue of the week, right? I want to say, hey, I know when I talk to you, that 10% of your revenue right now, professional services, you're trying to increase that mix next year to 60-40. Let's say, here's the things that you need to do. By the way, MFA is part of that, but I feel like that's a whack-a-mole, that's tactical, it's table stakes. But hey, let's prove to our clients we have MFA and a whole bunch of other stuff enabled that's going to grease the wheel of your sales and increase your penetration and your market share on your services side of your business. That's what I mean by a little bit different conversation than just being whack-a-mole with MFA or get a new sonic wall or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, and you talk about the being simple, and it's, I mean, the blocking, I call it blocking and tackling. It's basically you need to do this well. That's a minimum thing you need to do. And sometimes I think we overlook that, but sometimes the most simplest things that we do or that are out there could be the best things for us. And these are things to start from. So I don't think I don't want to mitigate it and say, or that's the wrong word for this, but I don't want to overlook it because it is very important. But sometimes people just don't realize. But I think, Brian, your approach there is spot on.
Yeah, I think we're missing opportunities as MSPs if we go to the CFO and say we need to enable MFA and here's what it is. I'd rather have from an MSP perspective, Jason, I'd rather have the CFO or the controller, whoever that is, sometimes the business owner, sometimes the business owner's spouse or whatever it is in control of the money, right? Oftentimes. And so I'd rather have them be a champion and understand that, hey, we're going to help you strategically. Yeah, there's some checkboxy whack-a-mole stuff involved, but let's be strategic about this and maximize something you said earlier, Jason, connecting your investments to return on investment. If I put $1 over here, what does that gain me? And I think that's where we can oftentimes be more strategic, and we miss opportunities by going in with a specific vulnerability or specific technology requirement that people like Jason often know. It's table stakes, especially CFOs. They get into their banking and financial institutions, which have required MFA for a long time.
Right.
Cool.
So, Andrew, if it's okay with you, in the interest of time, why don't we skip to Brian? I'll skip my last question. And Brian, if you want to take it away.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if that works for everybody. Yeah, and kind of in line with what we were just talking about, Jason, is Jason, when I sit down with business leaders, we'll just say C-level people for the first time, my go-to starting point is really understanding how that business makes money. What are the revenue streams? How are they profitable? That kind of things. And what I try to do is map the critical business functions, systems, processes, and the people that keep that revenue engine running, right? So from your seat, Jason, how do you decide where to allocate budget to protect and support those, I'll call them core business functions? And when it comes to IT and security, what specific metrics or signals guide your investment decisions? I think in the chat, Eric brought up, qualitative risk, right? High, medium, and low versus quantitative, $80,000 or whatever that is. Right. I guess what sort of signals and specific metrics are you interested in, and how do you make those investment decisions?
Yeah, great question. And I think that's good that you're doing that to understand, going through all those questions and taking the time to get to know your folks. But I look at it probably towards for budgeting purposes based on business criticality, geez, I can't say the word criticality, geez, and likely of occurrence. Those are the two things I kind of look at. So if it's outside of the, sometimes if it's even out, if there is something that's very highly critical and it's a high likelihood, and even if I may not have a budget for it, it may be something that I need to plan for and get it done now. So budgeting is important, and looking at strategic things for growth. And that's just having the discussions. If you find something or can identify something that is a huge criticality for the company and it's got a high likelihood, then sometimes you may be going to get that money now. But I do try to prioritize it that way. Something that we do here, and which I think, is look at basically like a risk registry. You go through and look at, is it critical to the mission of the company? Is it, what's the operational objective? How does it impact the financial contractual obligations? And what's the probability level? And each one of those, you can rank those and score it. And then each one of those has a mitigation cost and or strategy that, that I can then plan and start prioritizing. Some of these may be right now, I got to get it done this year. And if I don't have the budget, some I may prioritize over the next year or two based on basically just trying to get to the biggest bang for the buck, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and how much weight do you put on, like, if the IT person came to you, maybe in your previous function, and explained to you, Jason, here's something here's a critical vulnerability that's impacting 80% of your revenue. Is that directionally accurate, or would you need some more? I guess what would be in your head? What supporting questions or
that would pique my interest, right? That'd be like, okay, wait, so what does that mean? Help explain them. I'd ask more probing questions to say, what does that mean? Are you talking about continuing operations? Does it mean, is our network going to be up or down? Then it goes into like, well, okay, if that's going to be down, if I got an 80% probability my network's going to be down, and my network goes down, and that's going to take 2 days to repair, well, what's the cost of my not doing business for 2 days? Right? What is that?
Jason, I loved your reaction to that. And that's exactly what I'm trying to get across to MSPs out there, is your reaction to that question. You didn't start immediately tuning me out or saying, here we go again, acronym soup. And just like we started off talking about Sonic Wall, and we probably sounded like the the adults in a Charlie Brown episode, right?
Yeah, I was just need some popcorn because I'm like, I hear this, I get some of it, but man, I don't really get it.
Well,
Go
the
ahead.
last thing we want is our C-level stakeholders, right? Yawning, stretching, looking at their phone, and when's this guy going to get out of my office or off my phone, right? You engage, right? So suddenly staging that gets your attention, and now you know, okay, now I'm going to have a meaningful conversation because I woke up because this is something that's impacting a big portion of my revenue potentially. I need to tune in. Yeah,
and they may not understand, but just let them ask their questions, right? Because they're very, I mean, it's just and listen, most CFOs, they want to trust but validate, right? They're going to trust you're saying the right thing, but okay, is this true? Show me how you're getting here. Is this just something you saw? I mean, it's just, they're going to ask questions if they're going to do their job well before they spend it, especially if you're talking to spend a significant amount of money, or it may be outside of the budget, right? Because that's like, I've got to go to, my stakeholders up above and say, hey, I missed this in our planning process. I need money. Not saying it's not needed, but you got to show me why it's important to go and basically have a discussion that may not be very good with the stakeholders that I report to as to why I need to spend this money, right? And how did we miss it?
Yeah, and so you're armed with the right information.
Exactly.
At
the level that they're going to understand. Like I may understand a little bit more than them, but you got to get, if I got to go to a CEO or board level approval, they don't really care how much is it going to cost and what's this going to do for me.
Ryan, quick question to Jason. Jason, you talked about Brent Adamson, and there's also, other research out there on, over 60% of the deals, that are qualified ending up in no decision. Top sellers know how to de-risk. So a lot of MSPs it's all or nothing. It's 350 a seat. It's 250 a seat. You got 100 users. Does de-risking help? Hey, Jason, look, I know this is the beginning of our relationship. What if we started off with an assessment to look at risk based on, your outcomes that you're trying to get to? It would only, and it's part of, let's just say, initial onboarding. Even if you don't go with us, here are the things you can use for whatever you go to. Now, that obviously I simplified the hell out of a sales process, but does de-risking help if I sense you and the team are kind of, maybe going towards a no decision?
Yes. I mean, I guess I always think for my seat, it's very important if you can go in with some kind of assessment or some kind of way that you can show value where it's not coming across where you're trying to sell me a product or a tool, right? Just think of it as your investment portfolio, right? You don't want somebody to sell you just this fund because they're getting paid on it. You want to do what's right for you. So if you can help show me and ask the questions about my business and get to know me and build that relationship, and not just be sales 101 where you're just trying to take to the next level of the sales process. Build that relationship, really understand what I am doing, what I'm trying to do and trying to accomplish, and how you can help with that. And you know what? Sometimes this is relational. It may not happen now because I'm telling, like that value proposition, I'm telling our leaders right now, our sales leaders, because our CEO says that sometimes the second best answer is get to know fast. Right. What I think some MSPs do, because they're trying to sell so quickly into the cycle and they want to get the sale, that they start, like I'll say, enabling the client to where they're doing things that they don't want to support. Like if you have a tool stack that you believe in, let's go sell it. Help them understand why you are worth what you're charging, not trying to enable them to get down to something that's watered down just to get the sale. That's not.
Could I come in just from a legal perspective real quick on that assessment issue? Yeah. So too often MSPs are doing those assessments without any documentation in place. And
like any NDAs or anything like that, or
forget about NDAs. I mean, how is a MSP going to limit their liability? What's their warranty? All of that stuff. So you got to make sure as an MSP that, especially if you're hands-on keyboard, especially if you are deploying agents, that you've got an appropriate agreement in place. It doesn't need to be a full-blown MSA and statement of work. I've done like little 2-pager assessment to kind of take the best of both worlds in there. But if you're going to be hands-on keyboard in a customer's environment, or if you're going to be deploying agents in a customer's environment, make sure you do it with the proper legal protections.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jason. You're big on limitations of liability. Maybe we can, Brian, do you mind if we just riff on this just for a second? Eric, you and I were talking about this earlier today, But Jason, this is an area that, you talk about sometimes you got a big proposal in front of you and, everybody's like, oh, let's get this over the line. So, just talk a little bit about, limitations of liability and things, because this is something that I think sometimes we overlook, right?
Right. So I want to speak to an example we had as the current company I'm in, right? So we are dealing with a Fortune 100 company. You're doing some services work, and you guys are familiar with the golden rule, right? Those that have the gold make the rules. And when you're dealing with a client that's big, their MSA is pretty standard. They're not going to change much, right? So you need to understand everything that's talked about. Obviously, the data protection, all the stuff that's very tactical, which I will call for my technical team to review to make sure that we can deliver on that. But then it's also, what's the data retention? How do you dispose of it? If you have an incident and or breach, what does that mean? Who are you going to talk to? Then you go to, limits of liability. Then you go to indemnification. Who's holding the bag at the end of the day? All that kind of stuff, right? And when we were going with them, they required us to have more cyber insurance than we currently carried. So what we had to do is I then looped in our insurance broker. Even at that contract before then, I want my insurance broker because I do think that insurance is a way to help mitigate risk, and you need to have it if you're going to be playing in this space, in my opinion. And if your bigger contracts you have out there, have your insurance people look at it with you, because there's language that they key on in the contract. And Eric, I'd love your thoughts. I didn't know you were going to be on here because I am not a lawyer. I know not to be dangerous, but I also know my limits, right? So I know when to pull the lawyers in and the insurance people, but like to then look at it, because what you don't want to do is there to be language in there that you can't get out of, that if something were to happen, you think you got this insurance backing you up, and then, oh, behold, though, this language here caused us not to honor the insurance. You're on your own, and then you're on the breach for whatever that limited liability is. It could be tens of millions of dollars, and you're on the hook for it. And then reputational damages and everything else. It's just like reviewing contracts is very, very big to me, and I think it's very important. And you've got to look at it. You got to know what you're signing up for. In fact, we have a client that we were looking at as a PE firm, right? They just lost a deal because they were looking to go into a company, and the company that they were about to purchase within 2 weeks away, they got an MFA pop. Got into, and they looked at they were very not diversified with number of clients, but big clients. And the language that they had in all the client documents said that they'd have to tell the clients on anything if it was an incident at all, not a breach or anything, but any kind of incident. So they had to tell the client that this was a minimal thing, and they pulled out of the deal because they thought, you know what, the customers may not trust them anymore. They may lose these customers, and so private equity. This all plays into all that. And that's what the C-suite is talking about. And that's what's important to us. It's like, man, it's not just getting the deal. It's not just getting the sales deal and getting the profitability for that point. It's what does this contract do for the long term, and how are we exposed, and how is that mitigated?
Brian, back to you, but literally, this is what you talk about week in and week out, Brian, about your customers' contracts.
Yeah, they agree. Yeah, our clients enjoy cash flow just like we do, right? And sometimes and Jason sounds like he's prudent and does his due diligence on those contracts, but a lot of our MSPs clients, they're just signing stuff. In fact, some people that I even shouldn't be signing are signing, and they don't understand those compliance requirements, those data security requirements, compliance requirements, areas where they should have, like what you just shared, that should have been defined up front in the contract. That should have been redlined right away and said, hey, we'll let you know of any confirmed data breach involving data within the scope of this contract, or some language like that. And also as an MSP, I don't know how you properly assess a client's risk without understanding the promises that your clients have made to their customers, because there's tons of things in there. How can your stack and the things you're selling, how can you make sure they're aligned to the things that Jason just said are most important in the business? And that's fulfilling their contractual obligations to some of their largest clients, right? That's revenue streams. You can connect MSPs. Listen, this is a golden opportunity to connect everything you do directly to revenue tied to a client's customer contract. Yeah. Right. That's so important. And Jason, if I come to you and I say, hey, we reviewed your contracts, and did you know that you have these 24-hour breach or incident notifications? Did you know you're supposed to report your vulnerability scans once a quarter to this client? Did you know this or that? Where you can educate them and say, well, here's what we can do for you to make sure you're aligned with that agreement. What do you want to do? And you can look at your agreement and say, hey, that's a $10 million agreement. The MSP is telling me I need to spend 100 grand. That's a no-brainer all day long. Right.
Spot on. Yep. You got
it. There's no one customer any MSP has that's worth betting their business on.
There you go. That's a great way to say it.
And I was telling Andrew earlier today, I think it was, that I was negotiating contract with the client last week, and my client's end user customer is a production company of a extraordinarily high profile Hollywood power company, right? And so of course they're concerned about security and confidentiality and data security and things like that. And they wanted uncapped liability for those things, right? And I said to my client, I said, look, it's a business call, but a $4,000 a month contract, right? This is not worth betting your business on. So I don't care if they're a Hollywood power couple or a Fortune 100 company, as you mentioned, Jason. It just doesn't make sense to do. Right. It's one thing to stretch. It's another thing to break. And
that's right. Exactly. Great way to put it.
Yeah. And Andrew, it looks like we're down to 9 minutes. I'll just ask one last question, if that's okay, or turn it over to, one last question. Jason, from your perspective, how can MSPs better align with that decision maker, that purse string holder, the CFO or controller kind of role? I guess, how can MSPs better align to that to not only get, but keep a seat at the table as a valuable partner and not just like an IT or security nerd?
Right. That's a great point. I think you talking about, you wanted me to focus on getting a seat at the table first, or what was the first part that you want me to focus on?
How do they get that trusted advisor partner sort of, or get that seat at the table? For example, if you're going to make an important decision, how do you get to a point where you think, I should call Brian up and get his take on this, because I want to understand the risk and if there's any cybersecurity or security concerns, right? That to me is getting and earning a seat at the table, because I'm a valuable resource to you, as opposed to just maybe the run-of-the-mill IT guy that you hear a QBR every now and then and hear about how many tickets they resolved and that kind of stuff. That's one. But how do you get and earn a seat at the table and become more of that trusted advisor with you, Jason?
Yeah, you're talking from the MSP's perspective?
As an MSP.
Obviously, if they share some compliance frameworks or expectations, those kind of green peas that you got to make sure that you can deliver on. But I think it's that business discussion that we're talking about. Even if you're speaking to the IT leader or somebody on IT staff, if you can, I think I said on this earlier a little bit, but if you could properly equip them with the questions that need to be asked, that they can bubble up if they don't know the answers. Right. So that way because if it was me, if I was the CFO on the other side and my IT person starts asking these questions that they never asked before, like, hey, how do we protect our revenue streams? How do we do this? What is it? Why are you asking? What's going on? Who's asking this? And they talk, and I'm like, I'd be like, hey, can I have a conversation with them? Because I want to get then you kind of get to the seat at the table, or you help empower this person to get a seat at the table that they may want to get to. Then now you've helped build a relationship there that, hey, every time when they need something, they're going to go back to you because you help them look good in front of their, boss or peers or whatever. And I think that's important to do that. Does that answer your question?
It does, right? It is, get that champion, but also provide, direction and advice that your client can use, right, to enable the business outcomes, have it be more business focused. Exactly. And champion, nobody likes to look stupid in front of their boss, right?
Right.
And sometimes it is emotional. Sometimes gatekeepers do that because they think you're going to make them look stupid. Instead, you want to make them look like the hero. That's perfect.
We're doing we're having a big restaurant chain we're looking at, and we're starting out. I think for me, after coming to Ride a Boom and all, I think security is the tip of the spear to get in to do things, because it's an easy play. And I tell you what, we've already started to do more executive sponsorship with me getting involved at the sales process as part of that, so I can have these conversations with people. We're going with this person. We did a small pen test. They like what we did. We're doing some things. And now we've got later this month, a whiteboarding session, what we call whiteboarding session. It's basically with their CTO. I'm going down there, our CEO, they're bringing their CFO, and they're going to have sit at the table, and we're going to talk strategy and talk the stuff that we're talking about. How can we help you? Now, it's a little bit different because we do have the VAR side we can help with too, but also you can have that same discussion even with the MSP side and how you can do it from services. Because the way we view it and the way you should look at it too is help them have their resources aligned to what they feel is important. You can do the kind of the soul sucking stuff for them that they don't have time to do. They want a staff augment or whatever, but you don't know what they need and what they're planning or thinking unless you can sit down and have those discussions. So, I think the cybersecurity and MSP play is a great way to get tip of the spear in to start having these conversations, because you can show value very quickly with all the, the risk and issues. It's a hot topic. Everybody understands. I said earlier, this is the Gartner stat. 85% of CEOs see cybersecurity as part as a growth enabler.
All right, Phyllis.
Yeah, I think I'll just ask one question before time runs out. It's been a great conversation. So you talk about for MSPs, they need to essentially just be able to describe cyber risk to the business, to help win over a client. But in addition to that, in your old hat before you worked for an MSP, what kind of security and compliance evidence from MSPs would give you confidence in awarding business to a certain MSP? And do you have any war stories about sales or service providers gone wrong that you want to share? I know we don't have much time left. So.
Yeah, no, I'll kind of try to keep it quick. I mean, obviously, any independent validation, SOC 2, ISIS, CMMC, readiness, et cetera, that would be good. Your documented incident response plan, what would you do in response to help them? I definitely think for me, something that you can do to help get it is what I call maybe small tabletop exercises, help them understand what the risk is and what would happen and understand how they respond and what they need to do on their side and what you would do. Proof of insurance is big for me. Make sure that they have the insurance if something goes wrong, that they got the ability to help make you whole. If I'm a CFO, I'm looking at that for you. Client references would be big, and then actual examples of how you'd handled incidents in the past. I think that would be, kind of prudent, kind of small things. And red flags for me, right, are things like, hey, we take security seriously, or the general taglines, okay, doesn't everybody, right? Don't come with that. Don't say that with me. Just get past that. I don't have any, can't think of any off the cuff, any gone wrong as a time where things have went wrong. But what I can say is before I was at InfoSystems, the MSPs that worked with me never brought up the cybersecurity side to the level where I had to take it seriously. Right. They were just they were trying to keep my network up. They were trying to get my fee for it to make sure everything was running properly. And they didn't really, it wasn't a proactive discussion of looking at where I want to go and what needs to happen. And it was just really help me keep you on board now and help keep you safe. I was asking dumb questions about, ransomware, because that was a hot topic. But they never dug in to help me understand what I was really asking. And so if you hear them ask, well, what is ransomware? Should I be concerned? Use that as okay, they're interested. Really dig in, but you can't go in with all the tools and and the threats of all. You got to go in. This is why it's important. What is ransomware? And just help them understand, ask questions about their business, and then turn it around to how you can help their business and their strategies.
Awesome.
Phyllis, I think we got time for one more if you can.
Yeah, sure. So you did talk about showing incident response plan, which I think is great, and having like a tabletop exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you expect MSPs to communicate and respond during a critical incident from a CFO's perspective? And what should MSPs be doing proactively to talk about incident response, right? You already said like a quick tabletop and showing the plan.
Yeah.
And, also, I guess kind of detail how to explain that to the CFO versus a technical person.
Explain what you're asking for them to respond in a way, or the tabletop exercise?
The tabletop, how do you explain, incident response and how an MSP is going to do that for an organization when you're speaking to the CFO?
Yeah, I think from an incident response, about immediate acknowledgement that it happened, right? Clear situation, brief with facts, known impact, next is what you're going to do, regular updates, if any financial impact or estimates. That's kind of what I'd be looking for. That's kind of what I'd like to know for now. I don't know if I was I'm trying to think now, that's what I'd be looking for. But on the other side, if I didn't know, I probably wouldn't know enough what to ask. I wouldn't know. So I think that's where I think the tabletop exercise can come in, because I think there's probably executive level tabletop exercises you can have to them talk about how they're going to communicate as board, how they're going to do all this stuff. And you could use that, in my opinion, to also talk to them about their business, talk to them about their strategy, talk to them about that during those discussions. There's different levels of tabletop exercises, but I think that's very important if you can get them to understand and role play what could come out, because I live in the what if game as a CFO. What if this happens? What should I be prepared for? What if this happens? I should be prepared. So for me as a CFO, I love those because it helps me think of things I may not be thinking about that I need to be thinking about that can help protect my business.
All right. Thank you, Phyllis, for getting those two in. Jason, that was awesome. Again, Brian and I have been, talking for many years about speaking the language of the business. And like I said, you're kicking off a series where we're going to start bringing in business executives so that the community can hear from people like yourself what matters. And I hope you all found that's really important and impactful. So Phyllis, Eric, Brian, thanks so much. All of you out there for tuning in each week. We really appreciate it. And again, Jason, thanks so much for joining us. Wishing you all a fantastic, safe week ahead. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.